let's go on to a movie that maybe you enjoy just a bit more.
Yes. Well, I'm sure I do. Next up, we've got Child's Play 2. After the events of the first film, Andy is placed in foster care and his mother's thrown into the loony bin because no one believes their story about the doll being alive. Meanwhile, the toy company that manufactures the Good Guy dolls, they're rebuilding that Chucky doll in an effort to prove there was nothing wrong with it. I guess to, die down all the bad publicity they're getting. And of course, Chucky comes alive again and continues his search for Andy so he can take over his soul and become human once again.
To be human again.
Yeah. So, I guess, the first thing I have to mention here is that Child's Play is my all-time favorite movie. And of course, this movie, I really like this movie too, and I think a lot of people like the sequel just as much as the first movie. That's the general consensus, and that's the same with me. I like it as much as the first movie. It's I still claim the first movie as my all-time favorite movie just because, it's the first one that I saw. So it's just got that extra special attachment to it. All three of the first Child's Play movies have pretty good musical scores, I think, or at least very, very unique ones that are a little. They're different each time, but they all stand out in their own way as you watch the movie. And this movie did actually scare me quite a bit when I was really young. When I watched it, when I was 8 years old, maybe. Yeah, especially the ending. You try and put yourself in the shoes of these people running from Chucky. He's trying to kill the shit out of you, and he's saying how he hates kids, and I'm a kid watching this. I'm like, don't hate me. I like you.
Are you gonna be his friend to the end?
Yeah. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, so this is one, much like Chucky said, that is surprisingly about just as good as the first movie. Of course, I remember liking this one because, I saw this quite a few times when I was a kid also. But, it's actually a pretty well-made movie to the same extent the first movie was, which, is a bit surprising. There's some pretty good characters. It's, of course, it's nice to see Andy again, Alex Vincent, come back. So, I do wish we sort of saw the mother in more than just a photograph, but that's fine. But and of course my favorite character has always been Kyle, played by Christina Lees, who is such a really street tough character who is really fun, and I pretty much like any scene with her in it. This also is probably one of my top 3 favorite deaths in the Child's Play series, when this one teacher gets beaten to death, and some quality stuff. God, and if any character in these movies deserved it, that teacher definitely did.
Yeah. Well, we don't necessarily know if... I'm sure Chucky killed her, but we don't know if that is how he finished her off. He's whacking her, and obviously she... he might have just strangled her after whacking her a bunch of times, who knows, but we don't actually see her stop breathing, so...
I'm just holding out hope.
A couple things about this movie. A lot of, especially with slasher movies, usually a lot of movies tend to have just ridiculous ways of bringing characters back. And I think the idea of, the toy company rebuilding the doll to kind of hush all the negative publicity, that's a viable reason to actually lead into a character like this coming back. I think it actually makes sense, rather than just someone getting struck by lightning and now they're, walking around again back from the dead. And
yeah, I'm thinking about any of the numerous Nightmare on Elm Street sequels when Freddy came back just because he felt like it, basically.
Like a dog pissed on him and he comes back.
Yeah. In a dream, too.
Yeah. So I think that makes pretty good sense. It's a good way to bring this character back. The electrocution scene's a bit... You might say that's a little bit too much power from from this character. I mean, he's got voodoo, but he doesn't necessarily have the power to electrocute. But, well, I guess, you can say he's a doll. He's got some wires in him, and somehow he caused that to happen. But, I mean, it's a killer doll movie, so you don't overanalyze that type of thing. I thought that was a pretty good way of bringing him back for the second movie.
Yeah, I do like how they kept a solid consistency. Not only do they have a good reason to for him to come back, but the movie itself, it's not like it's a deep drop in quality. And I don't know if there's that many horror movies you can say that for. There are some exceptions, like Alien and Aliens, both are, in fact, many people consider Aliens about the movie. But, I mean, look at The Exorcist to The Exorcist 2, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which was an abomination. And, I mean, there's not many horror movies that have a sequel that, pretty much stands in the same footing as the original. So, that's something that I feel is somewhat easy to miss, mainly because I think many people sort of underrate the Child's Play series overall anyway. But it's just something I'm personally impressed with, and to be honest, the character, what's her name? I just totally blanked. But Kyle, that character is probably more fun than any character in the first movie. At least, gives it a little, more of a youthful, kick-ass feel to it. So I don't know, it's just a movie that I think is pretty enjoyable. Honestly, I don't see why somebody could watch the first movie, watch this, and have an issue with this one. I guess I just don't see that.
I remember seeing Roger Ebert talk about this movie, because he actually quite liked the first movie, which is kind of surprising because they tend to rip a lot of horror movies to shreds. And he also said this one was actually really well made, but at the same time he didn't recommend it because he thought it was quite a sickening movie.
Of course.
So, more because, it's a little more exploitative than the original one is, I guess, because this one's just more about just killing, and the original one, did have probably a little more suspense, or a bit more story to it, and some more character development to it. But, for us and for slasher fans or Chucky fans, that type of thing's not the biggest obstacle. The only thing about this movie that, and it in no way, shape, or form really affects my enjoyment of the movie, but it's something I enjoy from the original that this one doesn't have, is the kind of evolution of the doll turning into more human. Like the original one, you could actually see the doll becoming human from looking older, like you've got the receding hairline, bushier eyebrows, and things like that. You can really see the doll change. And in this one, from the first scene to the last scene, still looks the same. And of course we see towards the end, he's, bit of a spoiler alert here, but I assume 99.9% of people watching or listening to us probably already seen the movie. It gets to a point where he says, "No, I've used up too much time now. I've gone past the point of becoming too human." And all we see from that is just, he's dripping some blood from his nose. But compared to the original, we can actually see him as time goes by, that turning more human. In this, it just doesn't have that same effect.
I see where you're going. At the same time, the conclusion of this movie, throughout the finale, you see Chucky get more and more messed up in the toy factory. And though I sort of wish, they had gone maybe what they did with the first movie, I still thought, it was decently effective with just what they did.
Yeah. I think it's probably more that partially budget, but yeah, it'd probably take a lot of time and effort to go through all that again, because that'd require so many more dolls and probably a lot more animatronic type stuff involved, and so I can kind of see why, it potentially didn't happen. And like I said, it certainly didn't affect my enjoyment of the movie. And I guess one last thing is just speaking about that ending to the movie. That's definitely one of the best ending locations for a horror movie, in my opinion. I mean, it's so... We're so used to seeing people, outside in the dark, or, some dark location, and now we get this, fairly brightly lit toy factory. And it actually becomes quite scary. Like, they're put in certain situations where they have to climb up that, what do you call it? I can't remember what it's called. Not a conveyor belt, but, yeah, they're climbing up that thing.
That thing.
That thing. I can't remember the name of what it's called, but you know what I'm talking about, where they're climbing up just before Chucky has a problem with his hand. Yeah, that scene's, you know, really suspenseful, and when he's coming up behind, and I swear I'm not coming out. No.
I didn't say anything.
Don't make that connection.
I think you're the only one making that connection.
Okay.
Yeah, so Child's Play 2 is surprisingly a pretty good movie. It's one that I've seen quite a few times throughout my life, and I'll probably see it quite a few more times. It's probably the second, maybe third best movie in the series, which in my opinion is pretty high praise for the Child's Play series. And I'm giving this one an 8.5, and I'm actually going to round it up to a 9 out of 10.
Yeah. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10 sequel to my all-time favorite movie, and it's just as enjoyable. For all the reasons that we've discussed, I don't need to really go on much more about it. It's just a awesome movie.